Hey guys, what's going on? Andrew coming at you, and this one's going to be 5 things that Sweden has ruined for me. And this one's supposed to be fun, so don't take it too seriously, but maybe it's some things that I enjoy more in the United States or some things that I enjoy more in Sweden that when I go back to the States, I just feel like it's totally ruined for me. I saw a video on TikTok where someone was talking about this. Can't remember the content creator's name. If I ever do, I'll link it in the description below for you guys. But let's just go ahead and jump into the video. And the first one has to be talking to strangers. And I mean this for real because, like, I've lived in Sweden so long that when I first came to Sweden, I was just talking to strangers all the time. I could go out somewhere to a restaurant. I would just start a conversation with people. And I didn't know probably the amount of panic I was causing to people, not only speaking English, but also just having a conversation with them, because I found in most cases Swedes needed to have a couple beers first before, one, they could even talk to me, and two, have a conversation. And the longer I've lived in Sweden, I've changed. Like, the longer you live in Sweden, the less actually you talk to strangers. Now, how I've noticed it is, like, in the cities, like I live in Linköping, like, I'll say hey to my neighbors. Like, we'll just say hi if we see each other in the hallway, but that's like the extent of the conversation. And I found that if you get out of the cities in Sweden, then it's not as weird to talk to strangers. But yeah, if I'm walking and someone just starts talking to me randomly, I think that they're a serial killer. So this is something that Sweden has ruined for me. I don't talk to strangers as much. And one thing that is true is, like, in Sweden, you don't say excuse me so much when you're squeezing by people. You just kind of squeeze by. And I found that when I go back to the States, I'm more prone to do that than saying excuse me first, which is, in our culture in America, it's much more common to just be like, excuse me, when you're squeezing through. In Sweden, for the most part, you kind of just squeeze on through. So number 2, and I work in education here in Sweden, and another thing that Sweden's just absolutely ruined for me is snow days. Because growing up in the United States, and if I would work in education in the United States, then I would most likely get a snow day depending on where I lived in the US if there's bad weather. And the thing is, it's just if the roads are too bad and there's a lot of snow, then you get a snow day. And in some cases in the US, and this was much more common, if it was just really cold because they were concerned that, like, maybe kids didn't have the proper gloves or equipment, we would have a 2-hour delay and the school would be like start 2 hours later in an effort to, like, make it safer for kids. This is if it's extremely cold in the morning. And yeah, that is never, you know how many times I've had a snow day in Sweden where we didn't have school because it snowed so bad? Never. Like, I've been here in over 10 years, and that isn't the case. And in the United States, when they're telling people there's a 2-hour delay, it's too cold outside, we can't even have the kids waiting for the bus. Being in the Swedish schools, it's like, no, the kids have to play outside no matter how cold it is, so their parents need to make sure they have the right equipment. I mean, maybe every once in a while we had the kids come in if it was really bad, but no, you're expected to be out in the weather at all times. And another thing is, no matter how crazy the weather has ever been in Sweden, I will always see one mofo trying to ride a bike. It doesn't matter. It could be an absolute blizzard. There's always 1 or 2 Swedes on the bike just somehow trying to get through, although I've seen plenty of them wreck over the years. So that's another thing that Sweden is absolutely ruined for me. Number 3 has to be movie theaters. And this is just in general. When I go back to the United States, I feel like movie theater experience has been completely ruined now. Because if you grow up in the United States and you want to go see a movie and you want to sit somewhere, we don't really have assigned seating. You kind of just got to get to the theater early. And it's the worst because you get to the theater early, you're sitting around for a good 30 minutes to now then just wait through previews for like another 30 minutes, which can be super annoying. And here in Sweden, you can just book online. So you find a movie at a right time where you can find the right seat for yourself. I like to sit in the back towards like the middle. That's just always considered to be the best seats. I get those seats and check it out. I don't rush to the theater. I get there right when the movie's supposed to start because I know there's a bunch of previews. Unless there's going to be a preview I actually want to watch. And it has made it that the movie theater experience is better in Sweden since I don't have to wait. I love it. Number 4 thing that Sweden's kind of ruined for me is, like, having a car. Especially growing up in the United States, you're, like, so identified with your car. Whether you like it or not, you have to have a car to get around. And I don't know, I always felt sentimental about the cars that I had over the years. Not like I had sports cars, but I enjoyed having a car. I enjoyed the act of driving around. But I haven't had a car now since I've been in Sweden, and I can see the need. You definitely need to have a car. But when you grow up in a system where the public transportation is good enough that you can get by without one, you realize, like, sometimes how ridiculous is the United States doesn't invest more money into public transportation because it's going to be better for the environment. And yes, people should have cars, but in a lot of cases, it cuts down on traffic because so much you're in bumper to bumper traffic in the US and it's just one person sitting in a car. Where when we have so many buses going, it's just better. And the other thing I'll say about taking public transportation that I enjoy is like you can listen to a podcast, you can go on social media, you can read articles. So like when I'm driving a car, yeah, I can listen to a podcast while I'm driving, but you have to be much more active. And I find I can focus on more things that I'm interested in during that public transportation time. So it doesn't feel like a complete waste. With that said, though, the negatives of public transportation, you got people blasting stuff on their phones. On the trains, of course, not everybody's always polite. So you got to deal with the annoyance of public transportation from time to time. And then the final one that Sweden has kind of ruined for me in general is just like the restaurant experience or fast food restaurants. And I know that's not like super important. And what I mean by that is like, one is like when I grew up in the States, it was much more common for me to go out to restaurants more frequently. Like maybe once a week, I would say it was normal for me to go out to a restaurant where one, that would be too expensive to do in Sweden. And in some cases it would be like restaurant food. In other cases, it would be fast food. And I know these things aren't that healthy, but I'm a long endurance like an athlete. Like, so I run probably between, at least on the small end, like anywhere between, let's say 40 to 70 kilometers a week. And because of that, I can do some cheat meals and I can pick it out a little bit. And personally, it's a cultural difference. I don't prefer the restaurant experience in Sweden to the United States experience. I don't hate it. I still go to restaurants, but it doesn't add up to the experience in the US for me personally. I know I've talked about this in a lot of videos. So I have a good time when I go to a restaurant and it's fun, but in a lot of cases I always find I'm like waiting for the bill. It's an expensive experience, and I just don't think the service is anywhere near as good. And I don't think I'm like someone that needs to be pampered. That's just a personal opinion of mine. So I've never been a fan of the restaurant experience or the fast food experience. But you know, I've heard someone say an interesting quote to me that I'll say in the end, even though I'm bashing Sweden a little bit with the restaurants and fast food stuff, is I heard someone say that in Sweden, everything you don't need is expensive and everything you do need is cheap. And I think that's fair to say. Like in America, the opposite is like the healthcare is going to be really expensive potentially if you don't have a good program, and the fast food is cheap, and maybe, you know, I don't know, alcohol, for example, is probably cheaper. But in Sweden, those things you're going to pay more for, but you're not going to have to worry as much about the healthcare stuff. The only issue with the healthcare stuff is like they only really take care of you if you're like deathly sick. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait. Where in the States, if you have the right money, the right services, you don't have to wait. So that's basically the 5 things that Sweden has absolutely ruined for me. Not all of them are bad, but I'm just curious what you guys thought of this video. If anybody is in a similar experience to me, do you agree with me? Do you not? Anyone that's like lives in the States, do you feel similar to I do? Have you experienced this? Please let me know in the comments below, and I will see everybody in the next video. Hej då!